we are going to be focusing on the absolutely fantastic subject that is law. I'm joined by the magnificent Dr. Jan Ewing, Assistant Professor at the University of Cambridge, Fellow of Homerton College, one of our Directors of Studies in Law, who is going to be giving you the deep dive into studying law at Cambridge and what it's all about. We're going to be joined later on by one of our fantastic students as well, Amy, who will also be here to answer your questions. So just a little bit of housekeeping in terms of how things will work today. Firstly, this session is being recorded. We do plan to have that up on the Homerton College website shortly if you wish to go back and watch it again. There'll be the first few minutes will just be me sort of setting the scene a little bit, talking about applications and Homerton College. Then we'll have probably about 45 to 50 minutes of Jan telling us a little bit about what it's like studying law at Cambridge, showing you some content. And then we'll have about half an hour of Q&A left at the end, finishing this section at around about 6:30 UK time in about an hour and a half from now. In terms of questions, the chat function is disabled. What we'd like to do is use the Q&A function, please. The reason for that is I can very clearly and easily mark which questions we've answered and which ones we haven't to make sure that we don't miss anything, so we're covering all of the main things that people are asking this evening. I'll be a little bit more likely to answer general questions that may apply to more than one person who is listening in this evening, rather than things that might be very specific to one individual. But we'll get through as many as we possibly can. I can't promise that we'll get through every question this evening. There's a lot of you here this evening. Law is a popular subject for some bizarre reason, but we'll get through as many as we possibly can. So with that in mind, let's get ourselves set up and started. Jan, can you just let me know if you can see the slides that I've popped up on the screen?
They're coming through. Just, yep, there they go.
I should say as well, apologies if the video and audio sync is a little bit off for me this evening. I seem to be having some connection issues where I am at the moment. So I think it may be a little off for some, so apologies if so. Right, I'm going to get through this nice and quickly so we can get straight into Jan. You know, why consider Cambridge? I mean, the answer to that question really is Cambridge is one of the best universities in the world. If you're here this evening, then you are probably a student that is aiming at some of the world's top universities and the best quality of education that you can get, especially with our law faculty here. You know, the supportive environment that comes with the collegiate system, fantastic student experience and support opportunities. If you're in this session this evening, I'm pretty sure you know what the University of Cambridge is all about, but you may know a little bit less about, you know, exactly how everything operates. When you are applying to the University of Cambridge, you apply to both a college and to a subject. You have 5 choices on UCAS to pick from. One of those can be for Oxford or Cambridge. And as part of that one choice, you will pick both a subject, quite probably law if you're here this evening, and also a college as part of that as well. You know, maybe Homerton, maybe one of the other ones that are available. To preempt a question, no college is better for law than any other, really. Most of your teaching and learning is going to be happening at the Faculty of Law, which is on the Sidrick site in Cambridge. You know, the Faculty of Law sorts all of the lectures out. It collects the academics from across the college and some extra ones to be able to give you expertise wherever it's needed. You know, your seminars will be there, your reading groups will be there. You'll have a library there that everyone who's studying law will be able to access that is full of books only about law. It's a fantastic place to start. They deal with your examinations and awarding the degree, and every student from every college will be going there for those lectures, for that core teaching, and for those same resources, for those same exams. Now, the colleges are more like home bases for students. You know, they are where you're going to be living, mixing with students who are taking, you know, every single subject across the university in most colleges' cases. You know, in all cases, you know, living and learning with and from people from every corner of the country, every corner of the globe. You'll have your accommodation there. Lots of academic and pastoral care systems. You'll have a director of studies, Jan in this instance, who will help guide some of your learning and setting up your supervisions, small group teaching that you'll get. But those can be with academics from across the university. We're going to get you to the specialists that you need to see in terms of the topics you're studying. We've got all of the boring yet necessary things that you need to live cooking facilities, washing facilities, sports grounds, communal spaces like coffee shops and bars. They're little places for everyone to gather and socialize. A college, above all, in the end, is a community. It's not just a set of buildings. It's a group of people, students, staff, and academics, all working together, building that community that we can all learn from each other and expand our understanding from. The colleges are also in charge of admissions. If you apply to a college, that is the college that will assess your application, and they'll get first call on whether to offer a place to you or not. Another college may pick you if the college that you've applied to doesn't have space for you. There's ways of spreading those applications around, so it doesn't matter about which college you apply to. You can't really game the system. There's no advantage to applying to what you think would be a popular college or an unpopular college in any given year. We want to make sure this system is fair as possible. And you can also make an open application saying, I don't care which college I go to, stick me wherever. And you'll be allocated a college through an algorithm that will be the ones that are looking at your applications. One thing to note this year, as in the last couple of years, is that in terms of interviews, some colleges are interviewing online and some colleges are interviewing in person. For Homerton College this year, our law interviews will be held online. So, who is Homerton College? We are not, one of the oldest colleges in Cambridge, maybe not one of the names that you may have heard of, but we are actually overall the largest college across Cambridge, the third largest for undergraduate study. We take on around about 180 to 190 new students each year for our undergraduate courses. We're the most recent Cambridge College officially, becoming a Cambridge College in 2010, but we've been around a lot longer than that. We've been an educational institution for, I believe, over a century. So we've got that combination of some wonderful old buildings, but a new and focused attitude. It's the most diverse college in Cambridge, and it's really focused on making positive change. We're interested in how well you do here, but we're also really interested in what you can go and do and change out in the world, the positive things that you can do to make this world a little bit better than how we found it. As part of that, we have programs like Change Makers, which you can have a look at on our website, opportunities for networking, building some of your confidence and skills. But above all, I think the sort of forward-thinking attitude is really core to how Homerton operates as a community. We're a little bit on the edge of town, but that does mean that all of our students are accommodated together on one site. And it means that we build a really cool community where people get to know each other, where people make those links, those friendships. And I think that's a really important thing about how the college operates. You can see a little bit of the history of the college on here. Our master, or our principal, I should say, Lord Simon Woolley, really driving that focus on change as we go through. We've got over 25 acres of gardens and grounds. We've got gyms, sports grounds, 24-hour library, everything on site. Some of the cheapest student accommodation in Cambridge. We are consistently on the lower end of the rent bands, and 83% of our rooms are en suite, which is the largest percentage across all the Cambridge colleges. So particularly after an ensuite room, we statistically have the most of those. And one of the wonderful things about being in a college that's got some newer buildings as well as some old ones is that most of our accommodation was designed with flushing toilets and Wi-Fi in mind, which certainly cannot be said for some of the older, more traditional colleges that you might find around Cambridge. Loads of financial support for people across the board at Homerton and at Cambridge as a whole, especially if you are classed as a home student in terms of fees. You have access to the full Cambridge bursary. That can be up to £3,500 a year. Grant money, which means you don't need to pay it back. And that is means tested. If you apply for UK student loans, you'll automatically be given that money if you are eligible for it. But there are loads of other little extra things that you can get hold of. There's music and travel grants for any student. If you want money to start buy a musical instrument, start playing it, you can get some money to start doing that. Or if you can find a reasonably academic excuse to go travel and visit somewhere, you can get some money in order to do that. There's grants for internships if you want to take on a law internship in the holidays, but maybe can't afford to do so because the internship doesn't pay and you need to be able to stay somewhere and eat during doing this internship. Well, there's grants and things available for that. Hardship funds for if something really does go wrong are available. And of course, if you're a young carer or care experience, there's additional support available. At the end of the day, if you're eligible for home fees, please do not worry. Don't let lack of finances be reason that you don't apply. There are plenty of pots of money. If you earn that place at Cambridge and you qualify for home fees, then there are lots of things in play to make sure you can take that place up. It's a little bit more difficult for international students, I'm afraid, because of the large tuition fees on that front, but some of these little financial bonuses, they are available to all of our students. Right now, we are starting to approach the point where we're getting towards the application deadline, the 15th of October. At the moment, I'm sure you're choosing colleges and choosing your courses, getting all the information you need for your personal statement and for that UCAS application. But one thing I do want to flag is that you will need to check if you're applying for law, the admissions test arrangements, and that means that you need to register for the LNET. Please make sure that you go and search on your search engine of choice, you find details for the LNET and you get yourself registered. That will be taken at a Pearson VUE test centre somewhere near you. And if you have access arrangements, if you get extra time in examinations, then you need to register nice and early and let them know that you normally get those things. If you get, for example, 25% extra time in your exams, then you should also get 25% extra time in the LNET. The LNET itself has two sections. A multiple choice section is the first part, and then also an essay section. And we look at both of those in terms of our admissions. Don't focus on one at the expense of the other. And especially with the multiple choice section, make sure you allow yourself time to answer all of the questions, learn the tactics of the test, how many questions you need to answer in what amount of time, how much time you can spend on each of those. Is a really important thing. There are no negative marks as well, so do make sure you answer every question on that LNET if you can. In terms of that, you'll fill in that after the 15th of October. You'll also fill out the My Cambridge application form, asking for some additional details. Some colleges may ask for written work in law, asking you for an essay or two to give us an extra idea of your writing, although it's a little bit less common in law because we do have the essay part of the LNET. And our interviews across the board are being held in early December this year. There might be a couple of colleges just spilling into very late November. With that in mind, I think I have talked and ranted enough. There'll be plenty of time for any further questions when we get into the Q&A section. As I've said before, please do make sure you pop any questions as we go into the Q&A. But for now, I will hand things over to our Director of Studies in Law, the fantastic Dr. Jane Ewing. Jane, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for taking us through studying law at Cambridge.
Thank you. Thanks very much there. So so I'm Dr. Jan Ewing, as Sandy mentioned, and I'm a fellow in law. I'm also Director of Studies of the second and third years for next year, and I work very closely with my colleague who's also a fellow and Director of Studies, James Mannering. So yeah, welcome to everybody on the call. So I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about why law in the first place, why law at Cambridge or at Homerton, a little bit about the application process, and then just a very small taster session going through some case law, but then using that case law to sort of scale back the question into something that you might get, the kind of question that you might get in an interview at Homerton. So in terms of why law, obviously as you're preparing your personal statements and as you're thinking about the courses that you're going to be applying for, you've got to think about, why do you actually want to study the law? Of course, for many of you, that will be because you want to be a lawyer, either a barrister or a solicitor. For others, it will just be because it's an intellectually stimulating subject, which is very well respected. But you've got to be thinking about why the law, because it is a really taxing subject, and practicing it is it's hard work. And I've seen people that go into law because they think that it's well respected, or they go into it for the money. I think some of the very top firms are, the starting salaries whatever their trainees are now is now at 150,000 a year. But actually, I practiced law for years before coming into academia, and I saw people that came into law because of the money or the status, and they either continued in it but didn't enjoy it, or they dropped out after a few years. So you do have to think really carefully about why you want to study it. And of course, and we'll be getting onto it later, why you want to study it may well be one of the questions that you're asked in an interview. So you've got to be thinking about it, from that perspective. And then why, if you do want to study law, would you want to do that at Cambridge? Sandy's touched on some of this already. Of course, partially it's because of our standing. We are consistently ranked as one of the best universities in the world for law, best universities in the world generally, but specifically for law. This year, third in the world rankings, the QS World Rankings, first in the UK in the Times Higher Education rankings, first in the Guardian University rankings. The 2026 results are just beginning to come in, and we're first in the Complete University Guide as well. So in terms of ranking for law, we're ranked very, very highly, and that's consistently the case. And why specifically Cambridge? I think some of that will be down to the style of teaching. Of course, our ranking is there partially through, student satisfaction scores, but partially through the excellence of our teaching and the excellence of the research. So, we have some of the foremost legal academics, doing really cutting edge research in law to attract you. We have, just fantastic facilities. So up at the law faculty, we have one of the biggest law libraries in the world. We have a fairly new purpose-built building where, you'll be getting your lectures. We have a moot court there, so you can take part in mock trials, which not only give you a flavour of, whether you want to be a solicitor or a barrister, but also, taking part in the mock trials is a great thing to have on your CV. So we have those facilities there. In terms of teaching, so your teaching is 8 to 12 hours of lectures a week and 2 to 3 hours of supervisions. They're done in really small groups of 2 to 4, and I actually think that's one of the main features compared to most other universities in the UK, where groups will be 3-4 times that size. You will be supervised by a subject specialist in a group of 2 to 4. That does mean that you can't hide, you can't sit at the back of the classroom. You do have to have come really well prepared, but it also means that because you're in that small group, you get to know your supervisor well, they get to know you well. They get to, they get to see your strengths and your weaknesses so that they can really make sure that they've dealt with any areas that perhaps you've been struggling with a little bit. So you get that really, really sort of just specific to you, tailored to your style of learning, teaching in those small groups, which I personally think is invaluable. You also get, compared to other universities, a huge amount of feedback. So you'll be expected in each subject that you take, in each, land or equity or whatever it is, contract, for each subject, mostly, some are taught in a very slightly different way, but for most of your subjects, you'll get 4 pieces of written work over the academic year, and you'll get feedback on that written work, and it doesn't count towards your exams in any way, but it's designed to give you really tailored feedback, which then will help you to develop your skills ahead of the exam. So that's invaluable. Given our status, we're able to attract just world leaders in terms of who comes to speak. I was at an event last year where I knew that Lord Briggs was speaking, so I wanted one of the Supreme Court judges, but as he came to the front, he was followed in by others, and the person next to me was just nodding and saying, my lord, and I thought, wow, the whole of the Supreme Court are here. So you get just that level of people coming to speak, but also careers events, which can be invaluable. Barristers' chambers and solicitors' firms coming to speak, which just helps you to network, make those connections, because it is very competitive to get into law. So we try to give you that sort of real heads up there, and that help in networking. In terms of how the course itself is structured, so in your first year, those subjects are set. You'll have criminal law, tort, which is to do with negligence, constitutional law, and civil law. And then in your second and third years, you get 2 core subjects plus 3 choices each year. Those core subjects, they cover what are called the foundational subjects, which you do need to take in order to become a barrister. So we make sure that obviously all of those are covered. But then in your second and third years, you get 3 choices. You'll be able to see from the website what those choices are, because there's a host of different papers that you can take. And you also in your third year get the option to do a seminar paper. So that's an extended 12,000 word piece of written work, and that's in lieu of 1 paper. So you would then take in your third year equity, EU, 2 choices, and whatever subject you've chosen for your seminar paper. In terms of entry requirements, so if you're doing A-levels, the minimum offer that you'd be given to study law at Cambridge is A-star AA, and we'll also be looking for a strong LNAT score, as Sandy just mentioned. In terms of studying law at Homerton itself, we'll look in a moment at the entry requirements, but we do have a really vibrant law community at Homerton. So we have a student-led law society. Last year they put on a mooting competition. We were able to secure a High Court judge and a courtroom at Cambridge County Court. And the picture you can see there is of our winner and runner-up with the judge. So that, just great experience in those sorts of competitions. But we also have loads of things going on socially. We have semi-formal halls. This year we had a pizza night and a barbecue. So lots of stuff going on socially for you as lawyers too. And additional funding, as Sandy mentioned earlier. And then every student will have a director of studies. So for next year, James Manring, my colleague who I mentioned earlier, he'll be director of studies for the first years, for the incoming group of students. He will also be your supervisor in 2 out of 4 of your first year studies. So crime and tort he'll supervise. I'm the director of studies for the second and third years. So I teach land law, which is one of the foundation subjects that you'll all take. And also family, if you choose to take that. So it does mean that you'll be taught by your director of studies, and your director of studies is in charge basically of your academic development, making sure that you reach your academic potential. And therefore, and it's not the case in every single college, but but at Homerton, you will in law be taught by your director of studies. So they'll have hands-on knowledge of teaching you, which I think is really helpful as a director of study, just to be able to, you know, help you to reach your potential. But also for more sort of pastoral support, you'll each have a personal tutor to work with. And our offer is, you know, the general Cambridge offer, A-star AA, or 776 points in the IB. Actually, last year, our average entry grades, so our students were given their minimum offers, but actually on average, the grades were A-star, A-star A, which was just fabulous. We have an intake of about 8 to 10 each year, so it's a fairly small intake, but that does mean that you get to know everybody really, really well. We don't have any specific subject requirements, so it doesn't matter which A levels you're taking. That said, we examine primarily. Again, papers vary a little bit, but most papers will be a mixture of problem questions, and we're going to look at a sort of problem question towards the end of this session, or an essay question. So, students who have done essay-based A levels like history or English literature often, find that that's an asset, but we don't have any specific subject requirements. But what are we actually looking for in applicants? Well, obviously your academic abilities, so you've got to be meeting the offer that we make you, but we're also looking at your motivation and your enthusiasm, and whether you'd be a good fit with the course. So in the interviews, we'll be testing your aptitude for law. The LNAT helps to do that, but we'll be doing that as well in the interview, and your vocational commitment. But as I say, whilst most people who do law want to be a solicitor or a barrister, actually you might want to just do a legal degree because the subject matters interest you, or you think it'll be academically stimulating for you. So that's absolutely fine. Not everybody will want to go on to actually practice law. And we're looking at you holistically. So not only your academic records and your performance in the actual interview itself, but we sort of look at that contextually. So we look at your reference that you get from your school. We look at the results that your school gets generally, and we as I say, look at, examine you in terms of the interview. We'll look at your scores in that interview to see whether we think that you'd be a good fit for us, and that law would be a good fit for you. Okay, so, and then in terms of, your interview itself, sorry, dog just walked into the room. In terms of the interview itself, then successful candidates, they show a genuine enthusiasm for the law. So as I say, think about why it is that you want to be or want to study law. They don't rush answers, so they listen very carefully to the question that's being asked. They don't rush to give an answer. They think about that answer and they give a nuanced, well thought out answer to the question. And then, so we'll ask you you'll be asked some generalist questions. So about, why you want to study law, but also some, general questions from your personal statements. So do just make sure that you've read over your personal statements. We'll come on to that in a moment. But you'll also then get some sort of specific testing of your aptitude. And very often you'll be given a set of facts and some rules, and we're basically asking you to extract from a set of facts the relevant facts to apply a rule that you've been given, often at a sort of increasingly nuanced level. So once you've got the basics, we ask you, okay, now think about, and we'll tweak the facts a little bit to see whether you can take a rule that you've been given and apply it. And of course, we're looking for someone who's engaging and enthusiastic. So in terms of your prep for that interview, just think, through just the practicalities. Are you somewhere that's going to be, conducive to an interview? Is it going to be quiet? Is there, not in my case, not a dog that's going to walk into your room in the middle of the interview? Think about your internet connection, that sort of thing. Think about the lighting and the temperature and just having a drink and a pen and paper available, all of those sort of practical stuff. Think about, as I say, what interests you about the law. Do make sure that you've gone over your personal statement, because if you've referred to academic commentary or theories, then the interviewer will often pick up on that and ask you to expand on it or to think about why you agree or disagree with someone's theories. So do make sure that you have re-familiarized yourself with that, or with stuff that you've put in your personal statement, because there'll often be questions on that. So yeah, you've got to think through those things, and just you've got to be able to basically apply law. So we're not expecting you in any way to actually know the law, but we will be asking you to apply the law that we give you to a set of facts. So you might be given something in advance to read, sometimes just immediately in the kind of 30 minutes before the interview, given something in advance to read, or you might be given a set of facts orally to apply, because of course law involves reading text, being able to apply rules. So that's what we're going to be examining you on. So I'm not saying in any way learn any legal doctrines. You're not going to don't gen up on the definition of theft or how a mortgage works legally or anything like that. But because we're going to be asking you basically to apply rules to cases, then those are the skills that we want you to be thinking about and developing. So this is obviously just a silly example, but say you're renting a house. So if you're renting a house and the landlord has a no pets rules, well, the question might be, okay, does that apply to someone who wants to keep fish in a fish tank? Does that violate the no pets rules? So what we're starting to think about there is what the rule is, and then applying it to a particular case. So what about if fish are allowed? If you say, okay, well, you can keep fish in a fish tank, then you might want to modify your rules so that it becomes no pets except for fish. But then what if someone wants to keep their fish in the bathtub? So, what if you want to keep koi carp in your bathtub? Now, that might not be a good idea for a whole host of reasons, but do we want to modify the rule even further so that would be allowed, or is the rule going to stick at no pets except for fish in a fish tank perhaps of these dimensions. So we can keep sort of adding scenarios so that you get a better sense of how you might apply that rule. But I'm going to move on to just give you a bit of a family law taster session. You may not take family law, but just to give you a little bit about some of the case law we might look at in family law. But then I'm going to, because of course we don't expect you to know the case law when you come to an interview, I'm going to give you the sort of rules and principles that have come out of some of these cases. I'm going to give those to you in a sort of more pared back format that you might get in a interview, and then you know, I'm going to ask you to apply some different scenarios. So you'll see what I mean as we go on. So this obviously is a very, very pared back. We do it in much more detail in an actual lecture or supervision. But I want to explore for a few minutes with you the rules on distribution of financial assets on divorce, particularly in what are called high net worth cases. So in those cases where people are very, very wealthy, they've got more than enough to meet their needs, what rules have the cases developed in order to decide who gets that sort of excess assets? It might surprise you to learn that before this seminal case of White and White, House of Lords decision in 2000, then actually what the judge did, what the cases did in these high net worth cases, was that they very, very generously assessed what the wife might need, and then they gave her what she needed, generously assessed, and then they gave everything that was left to the husband. Or certainly, I mean, that's in a sort of typical case where it's been the husband that's maybe gone out to work and earned the money, and the wife who stayed at home. And of course, that had a really, really gendered effect. And it, you know, it almost beggars belief, because it just completely undermines the contribution of the person who hasn't been the main breadwinner, as it were, the person who's made the largest financial contribution. And of course, it's gendered because in England and Wales, we tend to run our family life on the basis that one person, after the couple have children, one person will you know, carry on earning full time, and one might take a bit more of a back seat and perhaps work part-time around the children, or give up work altogether. So White and White, and these are only, we don't have time to talk about unmarried couples, but if you think the rules for married couples are gendered, you should see the rules for unmarried couples. But for married couples, pre-White and White, that was how they dealt with things. Generously assess the need for the wife, give her what she needs, and give the rest to the husband, broadly speaking. But White and White said, actually, no, what we should be doing is we should be achieving a fair result. And a fair result shouldn't be discriminating between the breadwinner and the homemaker. So we should be viewing their contributions as equally worthy. And we should, as at least as a starting point, you know, divide assets equally. But we can depart from that if we need to do so. And very often we need to do so, perhaps because one party has greater needs. And again, that's usually the wife, because she's very often the primary caretaker of any children. And then Miller and Miller and McFarlane, so they were what's called conjoined appeals. So in other words, the court heard them together. They sort of developed the thinking from White and White, and they said, okay, well, we need to sort of distinguish between everyday cases and these high net worth cases. And in everyday cases, you know, your average couple that might live in a 3-bed semi, their needs tends to be the trump card. So in other words, because there's only just enough, very often there's only just enough when the couple were together. So trying to take that and separate it into 2 households, is hard work for the court. So if there's only just enough to meet needs, then actually we might have to give one person, usually the wife, more, because otherwise her needs won't be met. She can't, if she's not been earning, she can't get a mortgage. She might need more of the assets. So in these everyday cases, we might, and often do, depart from equality, and we'll do that in favour of the person with the greater needs, and that's very often the wife. And Lord Nichols in that case said, in most cases, the search for fairness usually begins and ends with needs, because, as I say, in most cases, people don't have excess assets over and above their needs. So in those cases, what are termed needs-driven cases, it really doesn't matter where the asset came from or whose name it's in. That's not important. It all needs to be kind of going into the pot for division, and usually the wife will get more in those everyday cases. But in these high value cases, these high net worth cases, again, sort of equal sharing might be a starting point, and often it's much more possible to do that. And here we might depart from equality, but this time we might depart in favour of the person who's brought in more what's termed non-matrimonial property. So the matrimonial property is what we'll divide, but perhaps we might ring fence some what's called non-matrimonial property. And non-matrimonial property depends firstly on the source of the asset. So maybe it might have been premarital, someone owned a house before the couple got together, or maybe it was acquired during the marriage, but it might have been because somebody got a huge gift from some parents, or they inherited from their parents or their grandparents. And in the search for fairness, it might be fair to keep that on one side for that person, because the needs generously assessed have already been met. So we're just talking about what happens to the excess. Whereas, we distinguish those non-matrimonial assets from matrimonial assets, which tend to be the assets that were acquired during the marriage. So to decide whether we're going to kind of ring fence that non-matrimonial asset, we look at its source. So we look at, was it premarital, or was it an inheritance, or was it a gift? And we look at the length of the marriage and the way in which the parties conducted their financial affairs, because the longer the marriage, the more likely they are to have sort of their finances to have become intertwined, and therefore the less likely we are to say that something's non-matrimonial. So we look at, did they keep it on one side, just in one person's sole name, and they didn't really touch it, or did it become a bit more intertwined? Because if it did, then it's less likely to be kind of ring fenced at the end of the day when the marriage breaks down. And there's been a really important, very recent, just in the last couple of months, Supreme Court decision called Standish and Standish. And there they talked about the fact that something that starts out as non-matrimonial, because maybe when we look at the source of it, it was premarital or gift or inheritance, it can become matrimonial through a process of what's called matrimonialization. So that is basically, the inheritance perhaps might become matrimonial because, hey, they used it to go off on holidays or to buy a lovely big car that they've shared, So even if it started out as non-matrimonial, as time goes on, it might have become matrimonial because it's been shared. Now that, I don't expect you to remember all of that, because if we were doing it in real life, we'd be spending a lot more time. But it just gives you a bit of a flavour of the way that we sort of unpick the rules that that have come from the various cases. So, of course, in the confines of an exam, we wouldn't in any way expect you to know White or Miller and Macfarlane or Standish. So we would give you a much more, pared back version of the same information, and then we would ask you to apply it. So, sorry, the same dog now wants to be out of the room. Sorry. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute to look over that. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you would get it in writing, the rules beforehand, but often you won't. The interviewer will say, oh, I'm going to give you a set of rules. So it is really important that you make a note of them. So you might be given a set of rules, something like this. So in family law, there's a rule that when a couple are divorcing, if the combined assets are only just enough to meet the parties' needs, and that need is primarily for housing, then the source of the asset is immaterial, because it might be required to meet the needs of the spouse with the greatest needs. However, if the parties' needs generously assessed can be met, in other words, they're a wealthy couple with plenty of assets to meet their needs and still with assets left over, then when deciding whether to allow one party to keep an asset in their sole name, the court looks at the source of the asset. So did one party bring it into the marriage or acquire it during the marriage, for example, by way of gift or inheritance? And they look at the length of the marriage and the way in which the parties arranged their finances during the marriage, because the longer the marriage and the more the parties treated an asset as shared, the less likely the court is to allow the spouse to keep that asset in their sole name. So that's essentially a summary, isn't it, of what we've just discussed from the case law. So you might be given a scenario like that and then told, okay, I want you to imagine the following. So here we've got a couple, they're John and Jane, and they have one child, that should read age 2, who'll be living with Jane primarily after the separation. And the question is, will John be able to persuade the court to ring fence the asset in his sole name and allow him to keep it? So in other words, it won't get divided between the parties. So I'm going to ask you a question. Now I'm just thinking, if the chat has been disabled, Sandy, for these purposes, is it okay if they just put the answers into the Q&A? Presumably, I'd kind of assumed they'd be able to put it into the chat.
Let me see. I'll still check. Panelists. No, panelists can actually use the chat to send things in. They won't be able to see the messages, only we will be able to see the messages.
Okay.
So you can use the chat for this purpose, and that'll keep things separate from the Q&A. So that sounds great.
Yeah, but they can't. Can they unmute their microphone to explain why, or not?
I don't think so in this instance. So I think the chat would be better, but I can happily read out chat things so that we've got a different voice reading them out. If someone could just type a test message into the chat for me actually right now, that would be lovely, please. And then if it's absolutely not working, it says chat disabled. There we go. Okay, in which case, I don't believe I've got the ability to redo the chat. In which case, we will use the Q&A function for it, and I will just mark things as answered when they're out of the way.
Yeah. Okay.
So it doesn't muddle things up. Cool.
Yeah. So I'll give you the scenario then, and I'll give you the assets. I want you to tell me whether you think John's going to be able to keep it, and in a couple of words, why, if you can. So the couple have been married for 10 years. The asset in John's sole name is a small 2-bedroomed house. The family live in that house. It's worth 200,000, and John bought it the year before they married, and they haven't got any other assets. It is in John's name, so can he keep it? So we've got questions coming in, but and does Jane work? We'll say no, Jane doesn't work. And so we've got an answer coming in. Don't think he'll be able to, as the child will be primarily in Jane's care. They've been married quite a long time. It's affected Jane's ability to generate an income. Yeah, all good answers. Matthew says, I don't believe that John would be able to keep the asset. Not only has it been shared between the couple for 10 years, but she needs it. Yeah. So it's that and Alana needs. Yeah, her needs are stronger. Yeah, great, Joseph, as well, focusing on needs. Yeah, this is very clearly a needs-driven scenario, isn't it? Her needs are greater. She will need somewhere to live. It's only a small 2-bedroom property, so she can't realistically live anywhere else. They need 2 bedrooms because they've got a child. So yes, it's a needs-driven case. So the fact that it's in John's sole name won't make any difference. So all of those answers completely right. And if you got this in a interview, that sort of it is a kind of starting question, and then we tweak with it to say, well, what about in the following scenarios then? So this time, same, couple with a child age 2 who's going to be living with primarily the mum. Okay. Sorry, my screen's just has it just stopped sharing?
Nope, everything is working a-okay.
Okay, so it's I can't see it here.
That's okay. We'll give people a moment to get those responses in. I believe I've got one answer in on this so far. Apologies if I've just...
Okay, it's very strange because I've stopped being able to see the actual slides for some reason.
You do get technical errors even at Cambridge on occasion.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can't see the slides at all, not just the Q&A.
Yeah, I can't see the slides. But I can see them on a different screen, and I have them printed. Well, I stop sharing.
Actually. Yeah, if
I'll
you stop sharing
and I'll reshare.
We've got answers coming in anyway, so it's giving people a moment or two to type up their responses. So if it was going to break, this is the ideal time.
Yeah, and it was also at the point at which Amy was asking to be in. Amy, who's going to be doing the Q&A with us.
Lovely.
Was asking to join. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Are you able to see everything now, Jen?
Yeah, and I can see it. Yeah. So, second scenario then, couple have been married for 10 years. The house is in John's sole name. It's a 2-bedroom house worth 200, bought before the year before they married, rented out throughout the marriage, and the other assets total 4 million. And so our Q&A. So, for example, this is in the, okay. So Heidi thinks that they might not be able to keep it. He might not be able to keep it because of matrimonialization, which is a good point. But someone then said, well, it could go the other way because they've rented it out and therefore it's been intertwined and that might have been shared, but he might be able to keep it because it's in his sole name. So when there's £4 million worth of assets, the likely, which is way more than they actually need, isn't it? The likelihood is that he'd probably be able to keep that small asset in his sole name. They haven't lived in it, although they might have shared the rent on it. So it's certainly not as clear-cut as the first one, but probably when, she's just going to take a chunk of the 4 million, and that relatively small asset may well stay with John. Okay, how about if they've been married for 5 years, and the house, which is in John's sole name, is worth £1 million. Oh, sorry, the asset in John's sole name is worth £1 million, but it's a bank account. It's in a bank account. It came from an inheritance that he became entitled to 6 months after they married, and they've got other assets totaling 10 million. And the inheritance, because they didn't need it, they had £10 million worth of assets. It's just sat in John's bank account, earning interest without either spouse using it. This one I think is a bit more clear cut. What do we think? Aaron says there's been no matrimonialization. Great that you're using the legal term there. Someone else is saying John should keep the asset. Jane never had use of it. Yeah. So the things that we're looking at there is, the fact that, yes, it was an inheritance. So when we look at the source of it, it was from a source that is potentially non-matrimonial because it's an asset, an inherited asset. It was after they married, so it wasn't premarital, but nevertheless it was inherited. And that key thing is that it hasn't been shared. So there's been no process of matrimonialization, and therefore it's pretty likely that John is going to be able to keep that asset. And then lastly, the couple have been married for 20 years. The asset's in John's sole name. It's a holiday home in Norfolk, about 2 hours from where they live. It's worth £1 million. It came from an inheritance that John became entitled to 6 months after the marriage. The couple have used the home frequently for holidays over the years, and their only other asset is the 2-bedroomed home in London that they live in, and that's worth 700,000. Is John going to be able to keep the holiday home, do we think? Aaron says there's been clear matrimonialization. it's the biggest asset, needs to be split evenly to ensure fairness. Do people agree with that? It's been shared during the marriage, so no, yeah. Yeah, so there has been matrimonialization of that asset, it hasn't there? You know, they've been married for 20 years. So he acquired it 6 months into the marriage. And for 19 and a half years, they've used it together as a holiday home. And it's, you know, it's worth more than their home in London. So it's certainly, and it may be, I mean, he's obviously still going to keep a big chunk of it because he needs to be rehoused as well. But he won't be able to just ring fence it, because of course if he just ring fenced it, he'd then say, okay, well that's mine and I'm ring fencing it, but the home that we share now, that's both of ours, that is matrimonial property and I want my share of that. And you'd end up with John walking away with more of the assets than Jane, even though Jane is going to be the primary carer of these children. So the answer is he's not going to be able to keep it. There has been matrimonialization, but great that you're picking up on the language from your sort of mini lecture, matrimonialization, and the principles like fairness. But do you see how you don't actually need to know the judgments in White and Standish to be able to do that in a interview, because actually I've given you a set of rules and then I've asked you to apply that to a set of facts. And what we're looking for is your ability to extract the important information and apply it to a rule, and to be able to justify why. So and you were all doing that really well. So you know it is possible. Anyway, that draws what I have to say to a close. We've got about 25 minutes. We've been joined by one of our star pupils. She'll be going red as I say that, but Amy did, yeah, she's just been a star this first year, and I'm really looking forward to teaching her next year. She's chosen family, and I'll be teaching her for land as well. But she'll be able to answer, you know, some of your questions just on really how she's found studying law at Homerton, how she's found Homerton itself. But yeah, maybe Sandy's going to field some of the questions for us both to answer.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jan, and thank you for Amy for joining us. Please get your questions in via the Q&A at this point. I'll start with a few that came in during the presentations, but if you've got more, please do start getting them in on the Q&A. One quick one, which I can get out of the way nice and easily. Someone's asked whether Homerton requires additional work to be submitted, and no, we don't request any additional written work. We do look at the essay that you submit as part of the LNET. We don't ask you for extra essays. I can't say whether all Cambridge colleges are exactly the same though. So if you do end up looking at a different college, please do check their website carefully, as that will let you know whether they have any additional written work requirements. And another quick one as well, just on the admissions front, whether there is an average LNAT score or what would be a strong LNAT score. I would urge you, don't play the game of trying to work out what a strong score is. The honest answer to that question is a strong score is what is a good score on the assessment that was taken in that particular year by the cohort of applicants who are applying for entry in that particular year. It's all about how you're performing in amongst the cohort of applicants. And we look at all of the scores contextually as well, because we know that some education systems actually lend themselves quite well to the LNAT or other assessments. Some don't. Other people have been to schools that can give them, you know, more resources and more assistance than others, for example. So we look at everything contextually. I cannot give you a number. And to be honest, it's kind of a waste of energy and effort to be thinking about it in that way. Really, it's the same as any assessment. You want to get a higher score as possible. Yeah, A higher score is definitely better. And you want to be putting all your energy into preparing for that LNAT, preparing for that essay, preparing for those multiple choice questions, learning the texts of the test, rather than wondering, am I getting, exactly some weird grade boundary that puts me in contention? It's a waste of your time and energy. Focus that in on doing as well as you possibly can, and trust that that will be enough. That is all I can recommend when it comes down to the LNAT. Jan, any other thoughts on the LNAT? Very briefly.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, because it depends on the year group. It depends on how everybody's done. So what would be a high score one year might not be the following year. So yeah.
We do look at both sections though. So we look at both of those at Homerton and at Cambridge. So we do don't focus on one to the detriment of the others.
Yep.
Is a key thing. Right, I want to get one going towards Amy here. Any particular law supercurriculars you can recommend? Now, obviously, you want to be following your own interests in law. You might like different topic areas within law than Amy. But Amy, tell us a little bit about some of the supercurriculars that you did to prepare for your application.
So, I mean, I think every school's different in terms of what they offer, and I think the admissions team are probably very aware of that. So, I think if your school does have things like debating and things like that, that would be really good to do. My school didn't do that. I kind of stuck with what it had. I mean, it was kind of the transferable skills more kind of, so I did like volunteering, I did brownies and kind of that confidence and things. But I'd say a big thing is reading. I think when you take on the degree, you will be doing a lot of reading. So I think if you can find one area that you're particularly interested in and then go away and find some wider reading to do with that, you can put in your personal statement, or I think that might have changed this year, but however it works now. And then like, you can be asked about it if you get like an interview. And I think if you can find something you're passionate about within that area, you are going to speak about it a lot more confidently and you're going to be interested in it. So I'd say whatever you choose to do, make sure it's like an area that you find interesting. There's no point reading through pages and pages of something that doesn't particularly interest you, because that will show when you come to talk about it. So yeah, I would say that.
Sound advice. If you're struggling for some ideas of where to start, have a look on the Cambridge Law Faculty's website. You can get hold of the reading lists, and they're all sorted by topic area. So if you're super into tort law, well, you can find a whole smorgasbord of stuff that our first years are reading, and you might be able to get hold of some of that. Similarly, if you prefer criminal law, then dive into the criminal law section. There are lots of supercurricular resources that you can find out there, and sort of banks of different ideas. But I think Amy's advice is entirely correct on this one.
Yeah.
Someone's asked whether you're able to. Oh, sorry, Jen.
Oh, and only that it's amazing how many students will put something on their personal statement, but then when you ask them anything about it, it's quite clear that they haven't actually read it. They put it on because they think it sounds good. But like, so if you're going to put something on your personal statement, do make sure that you've read it and read round it as well, because we will dig as to why that interests you, or why you think that argument versus another argument has merit. So yeah.
And we're not going to be judging you based on what your interests are. What we are going to be looking at is how you've engaged with them, what you've gained from the stuff that you've done, and how you think. It wouldn't matter if Amy had come to us with an interest in family law, or an interest in international law, or an interest in corporate law, or whatever combination of those things. We're looking at how she thinks, how she has managed to put together the ideas that we bring in. Is she going to be suited to the teaching system at Cambridge? And the answer in Amy's case was yes, absolutely. And she's now here thriving as a result of that. But it's not about whether your interests align with ours. Don't read something because you think Jane's going to be interested in it. Read it because you're interested in it. We want to find out about you. And this is, the university applications process is one of the very few times where it really does all revolve around you. Someone's asked, are you allowed to express opinions in your personal statement, as in give your opinion on why you agree or disagree with anything that you've studied? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. We love to see that sort of thing, because it shows you've really engaged it. And it's not talking about the thing you've read, it's talking about you and your ideas. The personal statement should be about you and your thoughts, or why you got really interested in the thing that you've read, or which ideas you thought were great and why, or terrible and why. You can disagree with anything you like as long as you give good reasons. Okay. So I think that is a very positive thing to do, and certainly better than just recapping what a certain law book says. Because if you're just recapping what the thing is, you're actually not telling us about you, you're telling us about that book instead. Amy, can you remember any examples from your personal statement? Did you do that at all, or how did you approach talking about the things that you've read and done?
I think it was kind of finding that like lead in. For example, I did an EPQ, which was about abortion law in America. So already there's that kind of interest in how the law affects women. So then from that, then I read a book called Eve Was Framed, which was about women in the law. So I think if you can link ideas together and almost show I was interested in this in school, so then I went away and did this, which relates, it's kind of showing that you are thinking widely and you see things that you're interested in, and that makes you go and then research more, which I think is kind of the type of person the university is looking for.
Yeah, I'd agree
Here's a very
entirely. Yeah, yeah. And it's not either, so it's not, we're not looking for, and do you have the same opinion on this subject matter as I might have? It's about, have you been able to engage with the fors, the against, and come to some conclusion that's that you can draw from the academic debates. So yes, don't, again, because you can spot it a mile off. The students, that sometimes you get the impression that students have maybe tried to guess who their interview is going to be, which there's no point doing that, because actually you don't know who your interview is going to be. But then they'll sort of just churn out what they think the interviewer might want them to say, as opposed to what they actually think, or so then you don't distinguish yourself from anybody else, because you've just said the same academic debate about the same academic issue, and you've come to the same academic conclusion as the person that's just been interviewed before that. So yeah,
I think it's really important. Don't try to game the system here. And I know as intelligent individuals looking to study law, that's a temptation, right? Especially if this is not a case to try and win. This is you showing us your skills, and not getting too caught up in trying to eke out what you think might be a little advantage that actually is setting you on the wrong path. Someone's asked, last one on the personal statement now, should you focus on a personal statement on law as a career path or law as a degree? Jan?
So and there's plenty of people that will do law that don't want to do it as a career path. So if you do want to do it as a career path, you might have mentioned why. Is it something, have you come into contact with the law yourself for some reason, because of landlord and tenant issue that's happened, or what? Is there something that sparked your interest, and or is it something about sense of injustice or whatever that sparked your interest? But it is, we are teaching an academic course, not a vocational course. So it's your intellectual interest in the law more than your intellectual interest in being a barrister, even though that will be because you want to apply the law. But so it is an academic course, it's not a purely vocational course, and anyone who does a law degree and wants to be a solicitor or a barrister then either has to go off and do their SQE or their bar training as an additional vocational qualification, but this is an academic degree, so we're more interested in your intellectual interest in the subject.
Yeah, we really are looking for people who are primarily interested in studying the law.
Yeah,
as part of that, which may lead to that career or may not. But what you're going to be doing here is studying the law, not becoming a barrister or a solicitor. I think that's really key. Amy, this is a big question. Do take your time with this one if you would like to, because I think it's really important. Is the workload manageable when taking law at Cambridge? Do students usually struggle? Do you have any tips for how you organize yourself and make it manageable? Someone's also asked how much you have to read and write per week. So let's get into a little bit about that student experience of studying law at Cambridge.
Yes, I mean, I think that was a massive question that I had when I applied, and then when I was deciding whether to accept my offer. I will say I found this year, first year, manageable. That's not to say, I mean, there's obviously been moments where I've been like, "Oh my gosh, am I ever gonna finish this reading?" It is it's an academically rigorous degree at an academically rigorous university, so it is gonna be challenging at some point. They stretch you and they push you a lot because they know that you can do it. You got into that university for a reason. That's why you have to do the interview. That's why they check your grades and the personal statement, because they're picking people who they know can be put under that pressure and can do it. But I will say there is also a balance. There's some really good events that I've been to this year. So like the law ball at Christmas was amazing. May week, which is like near the end of term, it's actually in June. There's loads of events on in that. So I think it's a different experience to other universities potentially with how much work you get, but then there's so many unique Cambridge experiences on the other side that really make it worth it. And I think when you think about the fact that you are paying the same, no matter what university you go, tuition fees tend to be the same. You are getting your money worth far more here. I mean, I know people that go to other universities who'll have maybe 5 hours a week, five like contact hours a week, and they're paying like £9,000 a year for it. Whereas here, you are being taught by the people who write the textbooks, and I think that's like really quite exciting. You get to ask the people who have come up with these theories that you've read about the questions. You get to kind of talk to them about it, challenge them on some what they say, and they'll challenge you. So I think when you first go into it, it's kind of like oh, this is different. I mean, I don't think I was that confident at first when I came in, but I think, if you can sit there and be questioned by someone who's written what you've just read, and you can kind of hold your own, I think that's just setting you up so perfectly for the future where you are going to be challenged on what you've said. Um, how I manage it, I'm really lucky, and I think there's lovely people at Homerton. That's one of the special things about Homerton is the people are just really nice, and so I found it a lot easier because there's been a lot of support. So I've got a lot of friends who do law. So like the night before supervisions, we'll all get together and we'll go through the questions together. If there's been something that I've struggled with in the reading, someone will be able to fill the gap. I mean, I'm not sure how big each year is, but my year's got 7 people in. So like between us, we're all going to struggle at different points. So it's really nice to be able to go to one of them and they're always ready to like listen and help you. So I would say if you can establish that kind of strong friendships with people on your course, that's really helpful. I mean, and then you've got your direct studies, Jan, who, if you have any academic problems, you can go to her and she will support with that. You'll also have a tutor on the mental well-being side. So again, if you're stressed, overwhelmed, you can go to them. And I mean, they are quite in contact as well. You'll have like termly meetings. Ours took us out for an Indian meal, which was very nice. That was another nice little thing we got to do. So yeah, it is, the workload can be intense at some points, but I remember people saying, "Oh, you'll get so much quicker at the reading." I was like, "No, I won't. I'm always going to be, last minute." But you really do. You find that when you first start, you'll read everything back to front, and it will take you a long time. But I think as you go on, you get better at skim reading, at note taking, and I think that's why first year doesn't count as well, because you are the whole time you figure it out, and it's a big shift from A levels to degree level. So you need to kind of not be too hard on yourself and allow yourself to learn your new working style. And I think once you've got that down, then I really do think it is manageable. There's plenty of societies and things that I know that people have still got time for. So yeah, it's not necessarily like every other university where people go out every single night, but you still can have a really healthy balance.
Amazing. So someone's also asked me, you touched on this a little bit. What makes Homerton different to other Cambridge colleges? I should start by saying, did you apply directly to Homerton, or did you end up coming to us via another college?
I applied directly to Homerton. I mean, my
Yeah.
application was quite last minute. I wasn't sure if I did want to apply and where I wanted to apply to. And I think I probably didn't do enough research. So it's very lucky that I found Homerton. It was more, I think I knew some people from my school and they'd all kind of ended up at Homerton because I think the partner like area is South Yorkshire, which is where I'm
Mm.
from.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of ended up there. But I think it definitely happened for a reason. I mean, Homerton itself has gorgeous grounds. Like there's so much outside space, which has been really nice to use this summer. So we've got like an orchard, which we'll go and sit in. There's the Great Hall, which is lovely. The Buttery, again, is like this big cafe, like all glass windows, which is really nice to study in. So there's so many places, again, you can work, it feels like you can break it up a bit more, and you can also enjoy yourself in a lot of them. There's the JCR, which is quite big compared to other colleges from what I've heard. I know our library has a lot more space than some of the other ones. But yeah, I just think overall, I would say the people is what make Homerton. It's one of the most diverse colleges. There's what I really like is all first years are housed in the same building, which I think is a really good way to get to know everyone. So like compared to other colleges where you're on, I think, staircases, so you might not run into people who are in your year like all year and not even know they exist. Whereas at Homerton, I feel like you see people in the corridor all the time coming in, and just to be in a building with everybody that's in first year, when you do make your friends, you're never too far away from them either. So yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to apologise, Emily. I've got one more for you, unless Jan's pop it. Jan wants to
No.
pop in here a little bit. Jan, go first. No, okay.
No,
Sure.
it's fine. Go on.
That's all good. I'm going to apologise, Jan. There's a lot of very good ones for Amy here that I think are really worth coming into. Sorry, Amy, is what you're here for.
Don't worry.
Elnat, how did you go about preparing for that? Someone has asked. Now, different people will prepare in different ways, so just do bear in mind Amy's way might not be your way, but to give people an idea, how did you go about preparing for that part of the application process?
Yeah, so I ordered off Amazon like a practice workbook for the multiple choice things. Because I mean, I felt like for me, the essays, I'd done all my A levels were quite essay based. So I was like, I've kind of got that ability, and almost like when I'm going to school, I'm learning how to write essays. So I was more confident on that. So for me, it was more the multiple choice section, because you'll find they are written in very specific ways. It's like a very complicated reading comprehension, essentially. And so I think it is about, they do have two, I think, free, or at least they did when I did it, practice ones online. So definitely do them. But if you can get like a workbook off Amazon and just go through the different reading comprehensions, you'll kind of start to pick up on the way that things are phrased and how they maybe deliberately try to potentially trip you up, and kind of what to look out for. So I just think practice as much as you can with them. And then in terms of the essays, if you do essay subjects at school, obviously remember what you've been taught, kind of try and make sure you have a line of argument, come to it, don't just kind of sit on the fence. But I think it's all about justifying why you're then coming to that. But I mean, you'll probably know that from what you've done throughout school. But I would say don't panic too much. At the end of the day, it's kind of a step to get in. It's one of many. So if you're really, really struggling with it, obviously try your best and do as much preparation as you feel like you can do, but don't kind of neglect your actual A levels for it, because it is just one step out of lots of different ones.
Jan, any other tips on, especially the essay portion, in terms of what we're looking for from a good LNAT essay?
Yeah, I mean, as Amy says, a good LNAT essay is a good essay, isn't it? You know, it would be a good essay in any other circumstances. So you're kind of looking at the fors and the againsts, and you're coming to some sort of rounded conclusion. Don't sit on the fence too much. You know, obviously you've got to draw on different sort of, arguments, but don't say, well, on the one hand X, but on the other Y, and just leave it at that. You know, you might say on the one hand X and on the other Y, but Y is more persuasive because. Yeah.
And it is A-okay to have an opinion.
Yeah.
In fact, we like that.
Yes. Yeah. So don't sit on the fence too much.
It's worth noting as well, we're not judging on what your opinion is. We might agree or disagree with it. That's fine. But actually what we're going to be judging you on is how well you argue for that point. Doesn't matter if we agree or disagree. We shouldn't be making our decisions based on whether we agree or disagree with you. But what we do want to see is good quality argument and reasoning and well-structured points in any good essay. Someone's asked, what is the general interview structure? I mean, Jan has talked you through some of our approach with the interviews and interview style questions. So I think they will get coldly technical with this. So most colleges will have 2 interviews of around about 25 minutes. It may be that in some instances, there may be a single interview that lasts around about 45 minutes. One interview tends to be a little bit shorter in total time than if you have 2, because you don't have to go through all of the setup and finishing things off that you do in an interview if you're doing 2 different ones. So the amount of sort of subject-specific teaching time that you're getting in an interview is going to be around about the same, whichever way. You'll have 2 interviewers in each interview to ensure that we're getting multiple different perspectives on you. One person might catch things that the other person has missed. One person can focus on asking a question while the other one's listening really intently to the answers. So don't be worried when you're in there with 2 academics or admissions representatives. In terms of the sorts of questions you can get, could be anything. Could be some new information. It could be something that you've been given to read beforehand, or some new scenarios like the ones that Jan brought through earlier. We could ask you about things in your personal statement, or we may not. Don't be concerned if we do or don't. It's just to get you starting talking about things that might be of interest to you. And again, we're typically not requiring knowledge. A couple of people have asked whether it matters if your interest in law is only started during your A-level studies or is a fairly recent thing. No, not at all. If you're from a different country, we're not expecting you to know the intricacies of UK law. In fact, if you're from the UK, we're not expecting you to know the intricacies of UK law. That's what you'll be learning as part of this course. We're looking for your knowledge and your reasoning skills. And in fact, I know of people who have come to legally incorrect conclusions in their interviews and still actually gotten places because their reasoning was strong. We're looking at how you think and whether you can learn in this supervision style of teaching, this discussion and dialogue with top academics in our fields, the people who write the textbooks, as Amy say, just like Jan right here. Can you learn with them in that sort of scenario? And that's what we're really looking to assess. All of our applicants are blooming brilliant, but it's about who is going to get the most out of this style of teaching. And that's what we're really looking at assessing with the interviews. That does bring us to 1:30. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to Jan and to Amy. Jan, Amy, if you've got one last piece of advice for anyone thinking of applying to law at Cambridge or at Homerton, please don't worry if you don't have one, because I'm putting you on the spot right now, and I know that. I'm going to pad the time for a couple of seconds just to make sure you've got a moment to think if there is something or not. But if you have got one last piece of advice for people, what would it be this evening?
So I think be confident in your interview. And I'd say that, if you do become lawyers, there will be a point in a case, especially if you're presenting it, that the evidence has not gone your way. And the good lawyers, they just keep going. And the people in the interviews, they just keep going. So they might have realized that actually they could have phrased the answer to that last question a bit more precisely or whatever, but they keep going. So don't give up partway through your interview because what you thought was a bad answer, actually, the interviewer might have thought was a great answer. And this is a tough subject. So if you give up in your interview, you're probably not cut out to do law at Cambridge. So be positive, be personable, be personable, be positive, keep going. That's what I'd say.
I would just kind of say to anyone not sure whether they want to apply, because that was very much me, I think applying to a university like Cambridge can be very intimidating. And I think it's very easy to think like, well, why me? You might not fit kind of the stereotype that you got in your head. Maybe you don't think you speak right, you don't. And I just think I would do it. I nearly didn't apply, and I'm so glad that I did. And I do feel like I've absolutely found my place. So yeah, I would say don't be put off by kind of maybe what you might hear or this idea you've got in your head. You may as well apply. You've got nothing to lose. Kind of, why not you? So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I very much think, why not you? I think that lots of people have imposter syndrome anyway. I was talking to a professor at Cambridge who said, oh, I'm not clever enough to be here. And I was like, you're not clever enough to be here. You have written, and then I reamed off what he'd written. But, so imposter syndrome happens to absolutely everybody. But actually, you will earn your place at Cambridge just as much as anybody else. So, we have got to give our places out. So why not you? Yeah. What if Amy thought, well, it's not going to be me, so I won't apply? Well, actually, it is going to be you, Amy, and you're here and you're thriving. So why not you? Yep.
And on that powerful message, I think we're going to close things out tonight. A huge thank you to Jan, to Amy, to all of you who have come along today. We hope this has been useful and elucidating. I certainly learned a lot from Jan's session there. This will be posted on our website later on, so do check back for all the details. And as Jan said, why not you? Get those applications in, do some great super crate killers, take that shot, bet on yourself, and we would love to see an application from you in the future. Go enjoy some law, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and
maybe we'll
thanks,
see you in
Amy.
the future.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you all.